Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Linda Van Keuren, and I'm joined by Mike Belmont. And we both work at the Dahlgren Memorial Library, or DML for short. We're located in Washington, D.C., and we serve the Georgetown University Medical Center community. The library provides resources and services to approximately 6,500 full-time equivalent users. And these are graduate students studying medicine, nursing, health, and biomedicine, as well as the faculty and staff that support them. We also provide resources to researchers and clinicians at a cancer center and hospital. Our resources are 99% electronic and have been that way for over 20 years. Like many health sciences libraries, we serve busy clinicians, researchers, and students who need timely, uncomplicated access to high-quality information, sometimes even at the patient bedside. In 2016, the library decided to move to a federated authentication system from an IP-based authentication system. And we worked with the company TDNet to implement Open Athens for federated authentication. There were a number of reasons for moving in this direction, namely better security and identity management, the ability to do more focused acquisitions, and the ability to generate granular demographic-based usage statistics. And how those statistics were developed and used is what Mike and I will be focusing on in this presentation. Prior to the migration, we only had counter statistics from vendors, and so we knew the usage by journal or book title, but we did not have usage information about who was using our resources. And so once we moved to an authentication system that was based on the user and not on the IP address, we were able to gather anonymized usage statistics about who used the resources. In conjunction with our University Information Systems Department, that's our IT department, we set up an internal process by which we could submit our usage data from Open Athens and generate reports of usage by sector and usage type. We use the term sector to describe the organizational structure within the medical center. Others in academic institutions might refer to these. This new level of granularity was extremely helpful. It was used in conversations with different sector leaders and departmental administrators to provide an overview of how many of their users were interacting with the library resources and what library resources they were using. So here's an example of one of the demographic-based usage statistics visualizations. Here on this slide, we've anonymized the data, but it's an example of the quarterly statistics that we've been generating since 2016. So this example is one of our journal platforms broken out by the sector. So you can see School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and so on. This is use of a single platform. It doesn't include much health data, so you can see that the School of Health section is quite small, but it is good for other disciplines, and that's reflected in the visualization. We've used these statistics for collection development decisions, internal budgeting decisions, and as I said, for presentations to sector and departmental leaders. In the past few years, the medical center, including the library, have experienced a changing organizational structure. For us, this means new administration and a new library committee. Although the existing demographic-based usage statistics continue to be invaluable to demonstrate the use of the library and its resources, the new environment requires an even more in-depth analysis. For library funding decisions, we are being asked the cost of the actual use broken out by the different sectors that we serve. The resources team worked out a method for calculating those numbers on an annual basis, and I'll hand this off to Mike to detail that process now.
Thanks, Linda. This process starts by running a resource usage statistic report from Open Athens. We get this from the Open Athens site, where there's a variety of different reports that you can customize and pick from. But this report breaks down the usage of each resource that we have here at DML. This will be anonymized reports of usage by sector, user type, but there's a process in getting it there to where we can read and analyze the data appropriately. First, we run the raw data that we got from the Open Athens report through a Python script to make the data organized where the resources are at the top as columns and the users are on the left as rows in CSV file in Excel. We then add in our demographic information using banner codes and other departmental codes that are able to help us identify the user type in the sector. And we run another Python script to organize the data and demographic information together. Once we have that information, we use pivot tables to organize the data in order to see usage by sector and user type. The next step of this process is to illustrate the cost per actual use for each sector. In Excel, we have each sector listed at the top again as columns, with each resource listed as rows. This is able to tell us each usage from each sector for each resource. We then add a column for the cost value for each resource. This is from a report from our electronic resource management system. And we plug in those numbers to the appropriate resource, and this allows us to get the average cost per login. Then it moves into some of the calculations. The average cost per login is calculated by dividing the total fiscal year cost column by the grand total fiscal year use from the Open Athens data. Then we calculate cost per actual use. Cost per actual use for each segment is calculated by multiplying the average cost per login by the actual accesses for each segment. Then if you can move to the next slide. We then are able to see the chart as an example. On the left-hand side of the columns, you'll see those are going to be the resources. So we just use letters as examples. And then on the bottom would be the cost per use that we've calculated by doing the calculations that I just went over. So we're able to tell that example A has a cost per use of $3,319.16. This is just, again, this chart allows us or shows the resources that we have over 100 views. So it's not all of the resources that this particular sector has viewed. It is for the resources that have 100 views or more. So these are our top resources that example XYZ sector as viewed. And the sum of XYZ cost based on usage is based on the total amount of views of every resource. And another note is that the cost is not comprehensive of all the budget from the available data and information we have. Yeah, Linda, if you want to move on to the next slide.
Thanks, Mike. So I know this is a quick overview of a complex process. What we wanted to share, there were some lessons we learned if you wanted to implement a similar process in your own institution. We learned a number of lessons as we've developed this process, and we incorporate these lessons into all data visualizations and analysis projects that we do. So documentation is very important. Since this was developed in-house, it's quite complex and is only completed annually, it was very important for us to document all of the details. We also had a staff change after the first iteration of this analysis. Before the initial developer left the organization, she wrote down very detailed instructions for her successor, which was Mike. And when he came on board and started to work on the report, he changed and edited the instructions to reflect those changes in the process. Another thing we learned is to really be familiar and know the limitations of your data. So it was important to understand what data was not available and then provide that context when presenting these visualizations to administrators. For example, there's a handful of resources that are not included in this analysis due to their method of authentication is not Open Athens. And another limitation we encountered is some of our acquisitions reports from our electronic resource management system did not necessarily align with the Open Athens report, and so some translation of the acquisitions data was needed to align it to the usage reports. And we consider this an iterative process. So that's what we planned for. We knew that in academic institutions, there's always change. And as such, we'd need to plan to edit the process each year. So one good example of this is when we first started the process, we had a School of Nursing and Health Studies. And then the next year, that school had split into two different schools, School of Nursing and School of Health. And thus the logic for this process needed to be revised.
Yeah, and another lesson we learned in Excel doing this process. In Excel, there's a lot of copying and pasting at times, especially creating the pivot tables and the charts, and maybe plugging in some of the numbers for the cost for each resource. So just make sure you're copying the right information and putting it in the right spot. And the same goes kind of for the calculations as well, when you kind of drag down a column in Excel to create the same calculation for the next resource. So just be mindful of that. Another lesson was visualization of the data can be so impactful. So charts display data in an easy to read, concise way, and can help show trends, comparisons, or relationships that can be difficult to demonstrate verbally or with text. So we really rely on charts in the end to display the data, along with some notes to explain it. And then lastly, another lesson was to talk to your IT department and explain what you're trying to accomplish. We could not have done this without the assistance of our IT department in providing the initial demographic information and assistance with the overall Open Athens process. And that is it. I want to thank you for your time today. Please feel free to contact either of us with any questions you may have. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.